Up, buddy? pjnet.tv. It is 9:30 on the East Coast, and the bumper's running. We're in sync with everything. We're streaming to about 8 different places. Hopefully you're watching it at one of those places. And the chat room's waiting, and we've got Ron Gallagher standing by. So, counting it down to Studio 12. Well, good evening and welcome, or welcome back, as the case may be, to pjnet.tv. I'm Coach Prasic, and I get the honor of sitting here and listening to some of our interesting guests. I hope you enjoyed that last segment if you were here in the pjnet.tv chat room. That was our friends over from vinewords.net, Lakeisha Malden. And when we did a video for them last year, we recorded a bunch of those and kind of put them in the can, so to speak. And Jake McCandless would normally have appeared at that slot, but he had his girl playing a softball game, so we gave him a pass. And tonight, Dell has asked to take the night off, and I can't think of a better person to stand in Dell's stead than to have Ron Gallagher. You know, we didn't hear from you for over a year, and now within a week you're on twice. I mean, are you taking sides or taking over? I mean,
well, I really kind of figured last time maybe you were doing one of those things where you're going to try to incorporate the Gong Show with this, and then you get people, and if they ain't getting it, you just sort of, okay, garble them up and get them out. No, it's wonderful to be back.
Ron, if I was going to gong you out, I would have done it long before.
Yeah, you probably would, wouldn't you? You're not one of those kind of guys that drag along with people in the equipment, I don't think. Anyway,
and you were just getting to the good part.
I don't know about that, but it's good to be back, and it's great to touch base with some folks in the chat room that I hadn't seen, been kind of out of the loop, and that sort of thing. And always great to touch base with JD. And you mentioned Jake. I haven't seen Jake in a couple or 3 years. I saw him a couple of times at a writers' conference in the Blue Ridge. But it's good to be here. And hopefully life is kind of settling down for us a little bit now that we're new Tennessee residents. We left the People's Republic of Virginia. And it didn't used to be that way. But it's sure turning out to be that way anymore. And some of my favorite people with the Family Foundation up in Virginia are grieving because we took 2 votes away from them when we left the state. But we do love it here in Tennessee, and we're closer to our kids and grandkids, or at least part of the crop anyway. And things are beginning to settle down a little bit. It's incredible how many things you run into with a major move and surgeries and all that kind of stuff. You know, have you ever noticed, Coach, how when you get around people of a certain age, if you talk to them for 10 minutes and they haven't talked about some surgery, some doctor's appointment, or showed you some scar, something wrong with them?
Ron, I used to get so aggravated as a younger person, I would substitute in small group Bible study, Sunday school. And in doing so, it was a great exposure to a wide range of demographics. And I noticed that basically the prayer requests follow a progression, okay? If they're in their early 20s, it's about school, beginning a career. A little bit later, it's more about the career. Then it starts to be home ownership, family, okay? And then career kind of takes the front stage again. But there's a point at which the prayer requests become absolutely dominated with infirmity.
Yeah. And
it's like, you guys are old. Now I'm one of those guys,
Well, I can tell you, you don't know yet, but I just tell you, getting old sucks. It's just, stuff just quits.
How would you know? Ron, how old are you?
I'm not going to tell you.
Well, all right, here, I won't listen. You tell everybody else.
Let me just say it this way, Coach. I have to tell people I'm 96, so they tell me I look good.
Look good. Well, that's what I was going to say.
There you go.
Right. Okay, well, I won't ask you how old you are. What year did you graduate from high school?
What'd you say?
What year did you graduate from high school?
1964.
Thank you. Now we know.
Yes, you do. my
Well,
wife is,
well, of course,
said,
you were 26 at the time. When you.
well, we don't want to go into that. No, we don't do that. No, you're in a unique fellowship when you've been at least to your 50th high school reunion. So we've
Yeah.
passed that watermark.
Well, you have lived through no more decades than I have.
Oh, come on.
Yeah. You were born in the 50s.
Well, this, it's not right that you should look that much younger than I do. Can you do something with the camera thing?
Hey, I've got some pretty good gear here, and you can only see me from here up. It deteriorates rapidly.
I'll, take my word for it. But I'm glad to be back, and it's nice to get settled down. And we've been blogging consistently through all this stuff that we've been out of the loop with everything. But it feels good to be back in a kind of a semi-normal situation. And I'm really, really blessed to be here. I wrote last week, if I can get into that a little bit, so I thought I'd chat about what I wrote for last week's piece. I don't know, I'm dating myself really as if I needed to. Because I mentioned that one of my favorite comic strip characters, remember comic strips, Coach?
Oh, absolutely. And Sunday they were in color.
Oh man, yes. That was the highlight of my week when the Sunday paper would come. My grandpa would always get it. I didn't have a dad growing up, and my grandparents raised me for most of my early years. And they get the Sunday paper, and I couldn't wait till the adults got done with the Sunday funnies. That's what we called them, comics section. And my favorite character was Mandrake the Magician. You don't remember him, do you?
No, sir.
Well, then that's just you got more stuff.
He must have made
learn.
himself invisible or something.
Yeah, you do. Mandrake the Magician was fascinating. He was this debonair-looking character dressed in black with this long, flowing black and red cape and the magician's top hat and the ever-present magic wand. Mandrake had this thing that he could do that was fascinating to me because his magic power, matter of fact, somebody wrote that he was probably one of the early, if not the first, superheroes because they didn't have those back in those days. Well, Mandrake had this gift that he could just wave his hand like this and hypnotize people. And when the little thing that would pop up on Sunday in the paper was Mandrake gestures hypnotically, and all of a sudden, whoever he did his doohickey with, he could make them think anything he wanted them to think, see anything that he wanted them to see, and it was fascinating to me. And I thought, I have got to learn to do that. You can't
be hypnotized?
Stuff like that, and not figure out, I got to do that. So I thought, I got to learn about this hypnotism stuff. Well, I knew before I even started that it's a waste of time to get into encyclopedias. They got all of the big, bulky things.
Remember what those are? Yeah.
So if you really want to know how to figure out how to do important stuff, you go to my older brother had something that was called the novelty catalog. There's a little paper catalog like this. And that catalog, Coach, had all the important stuff in life that you needed to find out where to get and how to have. Itching powder.
Yep.
You could get itching powder. Whoopee cushions. You could get eyeglasses. You could get
blackhead removal tools. Yeah.
Well, sure enough, I got in that catalog, and there was a book covered the whole subject you ever needed to know. The name of the book was How to Hypnotize Anybody. Well, never mind that it cost 50 cents. That was my whole week's allowance. But you don't get power like that. It don't come cheap. So I got my 50-cent piece out. And back in them days, you take the 50-cent piece and you tape it to the little order blank and you put it in the mail and you send it off.
Right.
So eventually I got it back, and here's the book. It was so exciting. I was going to learn how to do this thing, And I could see it in my mind. I was going to hypnotize my irritating older brother and have him hopping around all over the house trying to catch flies with his tongue. I could hardly wait. And if that worked, I didn't tell everybody this. I didn't put this in the blog. But if that worked, there was this little blonde-haired girl that sat 2 seats over from me in school. Mm-hmm. I was going to have her thinking I was the best-looking thing ever crawled out from under anything. But it didn't work. I tried to get my brother to cooperate, and I told him if he'd help me with that, then I would see to it that when I got him under, I would make him smarter than he really was, which wouldn't have been hard because he wasn't all that smart. But anyway, so I had him look at a candle, and then I had him stare at this pinwheel-looking thing, and I would say, "You're getting sleepier and sleepier and sleepier." And all the knucklehead would do, Coach, he'd look back at me and say, "And you're getting stupider and stupider and stupider." Anyway, my whole career as a hypnotist was a total flop. But I learned later on in my academic journey, everything's a journey nowadays. You ever notice that?
Oh, yeah.
Everything's either a season or a journey. Anyway, my academic journey, I discovered that hypnotism never was embraced by the law enforcement people so they could wave their hands at the criminals and say, just stop running away or something. And so
they call those tasers now.
I learned that hypnotism is a valuable tool in some therapeutic situations. I have therapist friends in my counseling work that use hypnotism, hypnotic therapy to work on issues like addiction and other kinds of mental health issues. It's a valid therapeutic mechanism for some people, and it works in some cases. It's a fascinating kind of thing. It's more than just a sideshow to county fair. Anyway, the fascinating thing about hypnotism, whether you practice it or ever heard of it or what, did you ever see a hypnotist work, Coach?
On stage, but of course I'm not convinced that was authentic.
Yeah, it's about as authentic as Democrat promise. But anyway, I shouldn't have said that. Anyway, but it does have some validity. And what's required is to pull somebody out of their normal environment and put them in a controlled environment where there is very intense focus, where there is a trusted kind of comfort level for them, and where certain ideas, principles, icons, symbols, or whatever are repeated over and over and over so that it becomes kind of almost like a mantra in their mind. And in that kind of state, some people refer to it as a trance-like state. And so when they get in this trance-like state, they're very receptive to ideas, very receptive to alternate ways of thinking and that sort of thing. It occurred to me in this culture that we live in nowadays that we have situations that are very, very profoundly dangerous in some ways as far as affecting how people think. And I think what we see is that there are lots of situations and lots of circumstances that are a hypnotherapist's dream because it separates people from reality. It brings them into a controlled environment. It presents the same concept, idea, thought, image, symbol over and over again, along with the interlaced subterranean message that anything counter to that is dangerous and wrong. Welcome to wokeness in America. These people that claim to be so woke are more like having been hypnotized to the point where they see and think no other thing is possible that isn't dangerous or doesn't need to be eliminated. And the thing that concerns me about that is this whole idea of wokeness is a misnomer. These people aren't woke. They are hypnotically addicted in their mind. When you do hypnotherapy, there's a thing called the post-hypnotic suggestion. The post-hypnotic suggestion is that idea that symbol, that phrase, that word that's implanted in the mind while they're in this kind of alternate state. And then later on, when they're in a situation where there's some stimuli that relates to that, the thinking is automatic. That suggestion that follows the hypnosis is automatic, so they respond in a certain way without even thinking. Now, in the sideshows and stuff, people have people clucking like a chicken at certain stimuli and all that kind of stuff. Well, that's probably phony, but the idea is not. So that if you have certain things that happen, it triggers an automatic preconditioned response. Nobody's probably noticed how you get these preconditioned responses about racism, about the recent shooting, for instance, among the many, and all of that. There are instantaneous, spontaneous reactions that are indoctrinated into people. The thing that I really want to talk about, though, is that the real woke crowd. What time is it? I just want. I have to keep an eye on that because
Is it past your bedtime, Ron?
We won't talk about that, Coach. I just don't want to.
We don't have another guest after this, so we're at liberty to continue. Okay, as long as our connection holds up, we're good. Okay.
Well, wokeness is not something that was generated after. Well, I won't get into how it started because most people know how it started, but I won't get into that. But wokeness is not something that's brand new. God came up with that a long time before anybody on this culture ever got hold of it. And it's an important thing. And I'm going to read a couple of scriptures because I want to validate the fact God came up with this, not some bunch of ideologues. Paul said it this way in 1 Thessalonians, and I'm reading now. When you see me holding a paper like this and looking at it, it's because I didn't memorize the passage, which I probably should have.
No, you want to make sure you get it right.
I'm going to do my best. But you, brethren, Paul said, are not in darkness, so that this day should overtake you as a thief. You are all the sons of light and sons of the day. We are not of the night, nor of darkness. Therefore, let us not sleep as others do, but let us watch and be sober. For those who are asleep, sleep in the night. Those who get drunk at night. But those who are of the day, be sober, but let us who are of the day be sober, putting on the breastplate of faith and love, and as a helmet the hope of salvation. Clearly, God expects us to be awake, the ones who are woke. Then he said this, farther down, and do this, knowing the time, that now it is high time to wake out of sleep, for now is our salvation nearer than when we first believed. The night is far spent, the day is at hand. Therefore, let us cast off the works of darkness, and let us put on the armor of light. Walk properly as in the day, not in rioting and drunkenness, not in lewdness and lust, not in strife and envy, but put on the Lord Jesus Christ and make no provision for the flesh to fulfill its lust. Sounds like a woke crowd to me. Sounds like a crowd that's awake and paying attention to me. That's what God envisions anyway. That's his desire, it's his command for us, not to be asleep. And finally, in Ephesians chapter 5, but all things that are exposed are made manifest by the light, for whatever makes manifest is light. Therefore, he says, awake, you who sleep, arise from the dead, and Christ will give you light. See then that you walk circumspectly, straightway, circumspectly, not as fools, but as wise, redeeming the time, because the days are evil. I really think we need a wokeness movement in the country. Not a wokeness movement that's pointing fingers at everybody and accusing people and censoring people and canceling people and all that kind of stuff. Because when God sets out to deal with wokeness the way he wants to deal with it, he doesn't drag us away from reality. He doesn't sequester us in some protected enclave. He meets us in the real world where we really are. And the first thing he does is expose who he is, and we see ourselves in his presence. And I have to tell you, I shouldn't say things like this. I was at a revival meeting in a country Baptist church. If you ain't been to a revival meeting in a country Baptist church, you ain't lived. So this suave, debonair evangelist was chatting with the folks just before the meeting started. So this kind of excited brother, he says, "Oh, preacher, I really want God to show up here tonight. I want God to make himself known here tonight. I want God to make himself, that we can't miss him here tonight." And the old evangelist looked at him and said, "Yeah, if he did, you wet your pants." Anyway, so when we meet God on his turf, we see ourselves in his light. And Isaiah said, "Woe is me, I am undone." Then God shows us, he doesn't pull us away from the world. He shows us what we are like in his presence. And then he shows us not just the good stuff. It's not just let's all get together and praise the Lord, raise our hands, all that kind of stuff. I love that, but what he does, look at the world and all of the pain and the grief and the loss and the suffering and the agony he doesn't separate us from it. He puts us right smack in the middle of it and awakens us not just to the reality of it, but to why we are here in the middle of it. We need to be awake to why we are here in the middle of it. He doesn't not give us all this wonderful promise about prosperity and all that kind of stuff. And I love to preach about, give to the Lord, good measure, pressed down, shaken together, running over, and he's going to put all that in your lap if you give and all that kind of, I'm all about that. But he doesn't give us his promise of provision by removing us, or in a state where we're being removed from the poverty and the disease and the sickness and the impact of human depravity. He meets us in the middle of it, and he lifts the veil on all of it, and he lets us know it's because of the way we've sinned against him. It's because of our arrogance, our pride, our selfishness, our egocentric mentality, our consumerist approach to Christianity, all of those kinds of things. He gives us the nobility of justice and righteousness. And by the way, I cringe sometimes when I see all this stuff, and I don't mean to get political here either, but all these cries for justice, 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 justice reminds me of the story where this guy was coming into a trial, and they'd sent a preacher in to talk to him. And before they came into the trial, the preacher asked the guy, he said, "Let's pray together. Do you want me to pray that justice is done here?" And the guy grabbed him by the lapels and he said, "Good Lord, no, pray for mercy." I think I'm so grateful. I remember praying many times in my life how grateful I am that God isn't fair. Yeah. Because if God was fair, I'd be in one awful mess, I can tell you right now. But God shows us the nobility of justice and the righteousness of righteousness, and how wonderfully functional it is, and how well things work when they're done right. My grandpa used to teach me to do stuff, and he said, "Boy, you just got to learn to do it right." And of course, that means that was the way he did it, because my grandpa had two ways. My wife just says I'm hung up. I don't know if
no, you're on. You're on. Trust me.
Anyway,
this is not like last time.
But God shows us how important and how functional and how pragmatic justice and righteousness is, because there's freedom in it. If there's justice and there's order and there's righteousness, there's tremendous freedom to be who you are and to do what God created you to do. And so God brings us into this state, and he not only shows us the inexpressible glory and wonder of heaven, but he paints that against the mind-bending horror of being separated from him forever in hell. God doesn't put us in some artificial universe and teach us artificial truth to be applied in some kind of artificial circumstance. He meets us in the real world. He doesn't hypnotize us and give us things that make artificial responses to things that are just totally extraneous sometimes. He puts us in the real world. And God's woke crowd has a mission. It's easy to see the wokeness movement today has a mission, and I won't get off into that. They're not just random. They have a clear strategy, choreographed, designed, purposeful, objective-laden mission. So does God's woke crowd. The problem is that God's woke crowd aren't as woke as he ought to be. And we're not as committed to the mission as God sent us to be. And the mission is not to point fingers at everybody that disagrees with us. Our mission is not to go into some kind of spasm because somebody does something we didn't like. Good night. I don't have enough energy to throw enough spasms for all the people who do stuff I don't like, Coach. I find them every day. I tell my wife sometimes, honey, all I want is for people to do what I think they ought to. How hard is that? Anyway, our mission is to engage them. That's the tough thing. Not to just condemn them, not to try to silence them, not to try to eliminate them or annihilate their principles and all that stuff. Our job is to engage them in this stinking, rotten, sin-cursed earth where we live, and to bring the light of truth into that mess that we cringe at every day. To love them enough not to run from them. To love them enough not to embrace what they do. You'd have to be some kind of idiot to do that. But to engage them and to purposefully contradict. I listened to one of my favorite Bible teachers over the weekend, and she's a gifted one. But anyway, she said prayer is subversive. Prayer is subversive, and so is Christianity in general. God sent us in here to take things that ought to be turned upside down and turn them upside down, right? With things that need to be right side up to turn them right side up. But whichever way it needs to go. If it's broken, fix it. If it's going in the wrong direction, bend it, turn it, redirect it. To create better with what we do. So I'd still like to be Mandrake the magician. My brother's not with us anymore, but I still grieve that I didn't get to see him catch a single fly the whole time he was here.
With his tongue.
But anyway, my encouragement to everybody tonight is be another woke movement. Be a contradiction to all of the things that the wokeness that is plaguing this country stands for today. I think I've already exceeded my time, which wouldn't surprise me a lot.
That's why we put you on at 9:30, Ron. Or no, that's why we put you on normally at 9 o'clock, because I have to cut you off at some point. But Ron, myself, and I'm seeing it in the chat room, I could just listen to you for hours, okay? Because you're a good communicator and you've got a lot of style. But I would like to get a little bit clinical for a moment, because you touched on some ideas, and I have 2 bachelor degrees from the People's Republic of Florida State University, one in psychology and one in sociology. Now, those 2 sciences, they are social sciences, but they are interesting, and I think there is some light that could be shed on the current events that you're speaking of, that you are certainly alluded to or made reference to. One is subliminal advertising. Okay, when you're watching this video that you're watching right now, what you're actually watching is 30 still images per second. Now, there's a reason that there's 30. The reason it's 30 is the flicker fusion point of the brain is 24 frames per second.
Okay.
If a light is flickering 24 times a second, you can tell it's flickering. If it's flickering 25, now it's just steady. Flicker fusion point. Okay, so movies, videos, okay, are rendered at about 30 frames per second. Some can be slower, but it's always above 24. Okay, 25 surveillance video, security cameras are 25 frames per second. Okay, now, so at the movie theater in days gone by, they would give away popcorn. It's very cheap, and they would in a 25 frame sequence, they would put one frame of an ice cold Coca-Cola. You would not see it, but you would get thirsty. This is not made up stuff. There's a mountain of empirical evidence to support that subliminal advertising works. Okay, so messages can be embedded in the message that you don't know are there. Now, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, and I'm not saying this is happening. I'm simply pointing out a clinical fact that subliminal messages can be introduced into our environment, and we would not even know it, that could alter our thinking. Okay, so that's clinical science point number 1. Point number 2 is from the social sciences, and it's called selective perception. Two people see the same thing happen and bear a different account of it. Is it that these people are defective in their cognitive or perceptory skills? No. Selective perception is the notion that we cannot process all of the stimuli that is inbound. So our brain has this filter, and we tend to filter out and zero in on those things that affirm what we are already predisposed to believe. Now, the military has figured this out in the world of what they call black intel. You feed the enemy lies, but it needs to be a lie that they want to believe. Because if they want to believe it, you can make them believe it. It has to be believable. Okay. So these concepts are not just abstract discussions for professors to talk about in class. They actually get used in the real world. Now, another real world example, as a coach, the hardest call for a referee to make is intentional grounding. Because to make that call, you have to actually be able to say, I know what he was thinking when he did that. I know what his motive was. Well, ascribing motives is a slippery slope. We know what happened, but the motive is something that's spiritual. God knows our motives. Sometimes God knows our motives better than we do. We have an incredible ability to deceive ourselves. All right, so let's talk about the recent shooting, because I was fascinated as a scientist, and I'm not saying this from a political point of view, although I certainly have one. But as a scientist, I turn on, I don't watch television, but they're redoing the electricity in our home, and so we have to make sure the TV works so my mother-in-law will be happy. Okay. Channel after channel after channel. It's as if nothing else happened yesterday.
I know.
Okay. And it's all the same thing. White officer fatally shoots. Well, he actually fatally wounded, later killed the black man. Okay. Okay, that is a statement of fact. No one is disputing those facts. But there seems to be a woke crowd out there that already has decided what the motive was. They don't need to see any evidence. They want justice, but they don't want it in the court. They've already decided what justice is, which is ironic. It's more than ironic. It's now. I'll, as a scientist, I would say it is possible that it was racially motivated. That's one possible scenario, one of many. Could have been a mistake. She thought or intended to use her taser, not her, firearm. It could have been racially motivated. It could have been she intentionally did it to subdue him for reasons we don't know about yet. It could have been she was in fear for her life. I mean, there are many, many scenarios. That's why we have court, isn't it? To weigh the evidence. Okay? Because at the end we have to make a subjective judgment. What was first degree murder involves premeditated lying in wait with malice of forethought. So that's not the same thing as getting mad at somebody and shooting them. That's different. That's not the same in our justice system anyway. But it disturbs me, Ron, that so many people have already decided what justice is, and all they know and all they care to know is white officer shoots black person. And those facts are not in dispute. The motive is.
Yeah, that's a conditioning I was talking about earlier. You hear this stuff in the secluded classroom or the gathering, and then the same idea is repeated over and over and over and over. And you saw it. I mean, you alluded to perfectly. You turn on the TV, it doesn't matter with mainstream media which show you turn on. It's the same thing.
It's the same narrative.
Yeah.
When you get it, and I'm not even going to impose the race card. It doesn't matter. If somebody was shot by a police officer, they're going to start telling you that he was a father. Well, that has nothing to do with what happened. No. Okay? He was a husband. That had nothing to do with what happened. But they're trying to portray, and they're feeding into that selective perception filter those good attributes of this man. Never mind that there was a warrant out for his arrest. Never mind that he was a drug dealer. Never mind that he, and it seems to
get people out in the streets to riot, Coach.
Right,
it's the emotional component that drives them out into the street to riot, the rage and all that kind of stuff. Academic facts and isolated truth doesn't do that.
Right.
And that then gets what they want.
Well, and if that is the remedy, well, I mean, there's a host of problems here, but I'm calling for rational thought, okay? And rational thought would not include rioting and, well, if you want to make your opinion known, I mean, that's part of our something we're proud of. It's called the First Amendment. Right, but when you start throwing things, that's not exercising your First Amendment right. That's being part of a violent mob. That's not how we said. Before we had this idea, people used to remember when gentlemen used to duel. Absolutely. I demand satisfaction. Well, you want to go back to that? I thought we were more civilized.
There's going to be, there's this whole principle of for every action there's an equal opposite reaction. Mm-hmm. And when you're going to have this constant barrage of hate and destruction, and it solves nothing. Whether there's even if there's some nefarious thing done, stealing something from the store is not going to solve it. It's not going to create anything that looks like a solution. But they're not after solutions. It's an ingrained, conditioned response behavior, and the people that are involved in it, maybe not even aware of how conditioned they've become, how instantaneous the response is. It's like Pavlov's dogs; they just respond to the stimuli. Mm-hmm. Well, fascinating stuff, Coach.
Well, I say I wish we could solve it. There actually is a solution. You have pointed it out. The question is, are we going to embrace and live out that solution, or are we going to, appease our flesh desire for vengeance? I think more than anything else in the case in point here. But Ron, it's always good. I really I can't wait to check out the chat in just a few minutes and kind of cuddle up with a cup of coffee. I don't have a tutoring session tonight, and I can stay up a reasonable hour working on some stuff. Ron, I'm embarrassed a little bit to ask this question, but we know about Gallagher'sPen.com and your blogs. Publishing books, have you done that? I mean,
Well, I've published one book.
Okay.
I named it after the tagline on my blog, Right Side Up Thinking in an Upside Down World. It's a compilation of things I've written, and a lot of people use it for kind of like a devotional. The segments are a couple of 3 pages each, and you can find it on Amazon, and that sort of thing. And we have been working off and on. Things have been so hectic and chaotic for us over the last couple of years. But I do have a work on forgiveness that I would like to get finished and published before. I've taught it for years, and went through some things that God kind of made it clear that there was something He wanted me. I know it's one of those large kind of concepts, but there are some mechanics about forgiveness. And I've heard about forgiveness all my Christian life, and I've heard people preach about, well, you should do it, and this is going to happen if you don't do it, and all these circumstances and situations about it. But nobody ever told me how to do it. And when I was confronted with an issue in my life that really involved forgiveness, nobody was there to tell me, how do you get that done? How do you get that done?
And that presumes that you want to.
Yeah. So anyway, yeah, we're involved in that sort of thing. But the blog is at Gallagher's Pen, www.gallagherspen.com. And I'd love it. Anybody wants to come and check it out. And my wife has shown me some things. She's reminded me that I've been a contributing author to about 5 books.
Your producer, publicist, and is helping you out.
Yeah.
Well, Ron, it's been great. I'm glad that we were able to maintain a steady connection. I regret that what happened the other night, but if it caused us to have some extra time tonight, I think that's a pretty good way to redeem that time. And you've blessed us all. I can't wait to read the chat. Thank you for sharing with us tonight, Ron, and we hope to do this again.
It's been my honor. God bless you.
All righty. Oh, folks, I like you. I could sit and listen to Ron for hours, and you know what? He can talk for hours too. It seems like so. He's good at folks. We are so blessed here at pjnet.tv. That's going to wrap it up for me. For this part of what I do tonight, and I want to thank all of you who have joined us in the pjnet.tv chat room. I appreciate all of you who have watched this live on Twitter or Facebook or YouTube or wherever videos are shown. Maybe you're watching this and it's not live, and for you, we are deeply grateful, and we hope that your time has been fruitful and rewarded, and that you are a better person for having spent this time together with us. I would like to invite you to the best kept secret, the sweetest fellowship on the internet. It's at pjnet.tv. Get it? There it is. Our chat room, we watch the live programming in the chat room, so you can watch the program there. But the PJNet family that assembles there night after night after night are some wonderful people that have become like family members to me. And I think you would enjoy their fellowship as well. And so I would invite you to come partake of the warmth and the friendly fellowship. And the koinonia is the word. Google it. It's with a K. Koinonia. Really, Google it. Okay, time for me to go. Before I leave, anytime I have the opportunity to address the public, so to speak, regardless of the topic, I end it the same way because it's impacted my life greatly, and I wanted to share it with you in hopes that it will impact your life as it did mine, or as it does mine. It's 2 questions, and it's a challenge. You don't have to answer me or anybody else. You might want to answer yourself, and you certainly might want to share it with God. Well, He already knows, but you might want to consult with God about it. Here's the 2 questions. What is the boldest thing that you've ever done for Jesus Christ? Now, if you have to think about that very long, that might clue you in on why we ask this question and why I ask myself this question. But suppose that you feel pretty good about your answer. The second question may pose more of a challenge. How long ago was that? My goal is to never be satisfied with either answer.